the company behind the controversial ArriveCan app. We talked a lot about that.
The convenient part is taking your data, taking your personal information, and using it against you in their own whim.
Disruptive. Weird
thing to happen. A new scandal in Canada, or at least a development in a already previous scandal that has cost taxpayers a lot of money in Canada, ladies and gentlemen. So you remember ArriveCan? You remember the ArriveCan app where it came out during COVID? It was basically a mass surveillance digital ID, CBDC gateway into the technocratic feudalist society that people of the WEF envision Canada would become. Well, you remember, this is back from February 2024, taxpayers billed nearly $60 million for a failed app. So they pledged all this taxpayer money. They said it was only going to cost a certain amount. They pledged more money towards this. They then put out this app. It failed horribly. There was a lot of glitches and gimmicks and certain things that were flawed with this application, and then lost the money. So taxpayers lost all this money, billions, millions and millions of dollars, almost billions of dollars on this mass surveillance app that didn't even work. That's from True North there. Here's from the National Post. ArriveCan app so poorly managed, Auditor General can only guess the cost. Can only guess the cost because they didn't keep track of this. Funny how the Liberal Party mismanages budgets. They won't even release a budget now. They won't release a federal budget. They won't even have a budget for an application that they want to install on all Canadians. But now here's some new developments because the Auditor General went in and exposed a bit of the ArriveCan and their practices and went through the checks and balances. It's like Doge, but in a more better way, I guess. You don't have Elon Musk transferring that money right to the Pentagon or right to Palantir. So here's the Auditor General finding a little more dirt in this ArriveCan scandal that really is exposing the utter betrayal and the cost and abuse that encapsulate all Canadians. Listen to this.
Well, the Auditor General is tabling 4 reports today looking at efficiency and value for money in 4 areas of the federal government, including the company behind the controversial ArriveCan app. We talked a lot about that. Let's talk to CTV's Colton Prale live in Ottawa this morning about this. So, Colton, there are 4 reports being tabled. Karen Hogan, of course, is doing this. Which ones are of particular interest at this point?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, the biggest one is looking into GC Strategies, the company behind ArriveCan. This is a company that reportedly had over 100 contracts assigned to them over the past decade or so, and potentially was making hundreds of millions of dollars. Those were reports that were announced in the lead-up and that were cited by the opposition parties and that really instigated or were the catalyst for this report from the Auditor General. So we're going to get a look not at so much ArriveCan and the scandal there. That has been pretty thoroughly reviewed by the Auditor General, but by this main company behind it and the total amount of contracts that they were assigned, how much money that actually was from government, and whether some of the challenges that presented themselves in the ArriveCan contracts, for example, a lack of documentation, a lack of clarity around who was doing what work and if they were actually qualified to be doing the work. Did those problems persist in other contracts that they worked on? And also, crucially, did Canadians get the value for those contracts? How much?
So they're making it sound like, oh, it's my fault that we didn't have the documents. We didn't have the proper paperwork to track all this. What really happened and what we've exposed here on this channel before when talking about this scandal, on top of many scandals here in Canada, but the reason they don't reveal this information or claim that they don't have documentation about this is because deep down, this ArriveCan app that came from taxpayer money funded a public-private relation between the Government of Canada, the intel agency within Canada, and a private company, a private organization that developed this app, took this information from you to try to create this application that was going to mass surveil you, that was going to be in charge of whether or not you can cross the border. This came around during COVID, but this has been in the works way beforehand. This is part of the digital ID transformation that they were trying to do with this country. And they're still pursuing it, by the way. They're still trying to pursue it. That's the whole point of the Golden Dome in the United States. That's the whole point of why they did Palantir. And in Canada, they're trying to do the similar action with Mark Carney, because it is the way that people like Mark Carney, a central banker in the WEF, want to master control over every single individual, is transform people into the digital ID perspective, put everything to a phone application, tell you how convenient it is that you're not carrying around a wallet or a passport, or you don't have to show your driver's license everywhere. You just do it on your phone. It's so convenient. Meanwhile, the convenient part is taking your data, taking your personal information, and using it against you in their own whim. That's what all this is about. And that's why they wouldn't reveal this information. They came and they lied to you. They gaslit you and told you that, oh, we just don't have the documentation. They were lying to you right to your face.
How much was paid out, and was it worth it? So that's going to be the biggest one that we're looking at this morning when it's tabled at 10 o'clock. There are three others. The first one focuses on the federal government's use of its own land, and especially its own buildings. There's been a lot of talk about converting some of those into housing. Are we actually seeing movement on that? That's one Auditor General's report. Another one is regarding the Indian Act and whether or not people are moving through the process fast enough, and that's going to be a smaller report. But the other large report that we're looking at certainly is the F-35 contract. Canada has spent promised to spend $19 billion to buy 88 F-35s. So far, we've only actually spent about $1.3 billion and bought 16 of those F-35s. There's talk about reviewing the purchase of the rest. This is a report that looks into the entire project itself. Is it on time? Is it on budget? And what's the impact of these delays that we've seen so far? Are there any external factors that are going to cause problems for Canada as well? The Prime Minister on his way into the House this morning, on the way into his office this morning, was asked about that, and he said there was a lot to consider with regard to that contract as well. Certainly this is going to provide him more information on the state of that process and the costs of that process as he considers the F-35 contract and potentially other options in its place. All of this, Nick, tabled at 10 o'clock this morning, so very shortly we should have some answers and some updates on that.
All right, so the Auditor General is cooking the books of not only the ArriveCan app, the most costly scandal to mass surveillance, but also the mass immigration problem, the falsified documents of, student visas and international claims. Also, as they mentioned there, the F-35 program that they were trying to buy these fighter jets to add into the Canadian military to put us more at par with NATO, as they want to increase the budget or NATO spending to 2 to 3%. And that is what Carney committed to. But what's interesting about it, and this is from Rocky Mountain Outlook, Auditor General finds F-35 costs soared due to project delays and pilot shortages. Interesting. The estimated cost of Canada's incoming fleet of advanced stealth fighters exploded by nearly 50% in just a few weeks, Auditor General Karen Hogan said Tuesday. The fighter jet audit was one of the 8 tabled in the House of Commons by Hogan and Federal Environment Commissioner Jerry DeMarco. The reports flagged problematic procurement contracts, a backlog in applications for First Nation status, and a delay in reducing the amount of federal office space. An investigation by the Auditor General concluded that costs associated with the F-35 Advanced Fighter Jet program are running $8.7 billion higher than original estimates. So $8.7 billion higher than the already mounted $1 billion that they were going to spend on this. Because of bureaucracy, because of corruption, and because the mishandling of this transaction. They can't keep things on track. They can't keep things into a budget. It warns the program is plagued by delays and critical shortfalls, including a lack of qualified pilots. National Defense said in 2022, the base price for the F-35s would be $19 billion. Just 2 years later, that number climbed to $27.7 billion. The cost will rise further by at least $5.5 billion, the report warns, because the missing elements needed to make the jets fully operational, such as missiles. So we're spending billions of dollars on fighter jets that we can't even use and don't even have missiles until we fork over more billions of dollars. Just so great. The report said the department's initial estimates relied on outdated data from 2019, despite the availability of better estimates showing that the cost of the aircraft had already increased substantially during the pandemic. Opposition MPs used the 8 reports as political ammunition and fired off shots at cabinet ministers who were around the last government. A press conference in Ottawa Tuesday, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre charged it's all evidence of liberal incompetence and waste. This is the same liberal ministers, the same liberal game making, the same liberal mistakes that cost Canadians a fortune, he said. Intern NDP leader Don Davies, meanwhile, said the F-35 audit reveals a boondoggle that was incompetently managed and said it's time to take a second look at alternatives. The price has doubled. We don't have enough pilots for them. We don't have a hangar space for them. And it risks integrating more closely to the American military at a time when Prime Minister Carney campaigned against that very thing. So why exactly are we doing this? Why exactly are we wasting money for fighter jets that can't even really use to protect us? Because it's not about protecting. It's about transactions between the government and military contractors. Remember when that report came out? They were worried that the auto sector was going to collapse, particularly in Ontario. Remember that guy from, I think it was the Globe and Mail, said, hey, don't worry about the auto sector. Everyone's just going to build, bombs and weapons, a mass destruction. Canada's going to be the exporter of military-grade weaponry. That's going to bring us back. This is part of it. This is part of it. And they are so incompetent. They are so bad at budgeting the system and just the absolute transparency of how disgusting this transaction is costing Canadians a fortune. Meanwhile, our hospitals are closing down. Meanwhile, there's a homeless epidemic. Meanwhile, there's people dying of fentanyl every single day. Meanwhile, there's a crime spree happening in neighborhoods all across the country. And you had the federal government putting action to try to boost up our military, for when Canada gets attacked by something. And you're putting the money towards an F-35 jet that you can't even use. You can't even use. Defense Minister David McGuinty said dozens of other NATO allies experienced the same problems with ballooning costs for the jets. Oh, really? Really? Thank God we still continue to serve NATO. Thank God we still have this alliance. For God knows why. Obviously, we have an inflationary pressure on materials, logistic claims, supplies, construction, engineering, he told reports Tuesday. Not only was it Canada deeply affected by the pandemic in the United States, but every participating NATO partner had to contend with the forces that the pandemic played on the entire acquisition and development of the F-35. Hogan acknowledged Ottawa had little control over these short factors. Oh, it's the pandemic. It was the pandemic. That's, of course. That's why it's costing Canada a fortune. It's the pandemic. Shock on it. God, if only we were able to manage our money properly during that time and not frequently go out into a disaster mode, into a spending spree that's costing us a fortune, rising inflation, causing utter destruction to our economy. And yet we have F-35 jets that we can't even freaking use. But thank God we're still committed to NATO, right? Because this happens frequently. Not just with the pandemic. This happens frequently. So here is MP Larry Brock, I think his name is. He's one of the conservative MPs, and he's about to torch the Liberal Party for this reckless spending after the Auditor General report came out about the ArriveCan and the F-35 jets. He is going to scorch the Liberal Party on their mishandling of taxpayer funds, causing this inflation, causing the destruction of this country, and just the utmost ridiculousness of how to properly manage the economic woes and the transactions within this country. Watch this.
Today, sir, we are debating our conservative motion that given that the Auditor General found that the ArriveCan contractor, GC Strategies, was paid $64 million, and in many cases, no proof that any work was completed, the House calls on the government to get taxpayers their money back within 100 days of the adoption of this motion, and 2, impose a lifetime contracting ban on GC Strategies, their subsidiaries, but more importantly, its founders, its principal partners, Christian Firth and Darren Anthony, and any other entities with which those individuals are affiliated. Simple message is Canadians want their taxpayer money back. I know that the member for Winnipeg North claims that no one in his riding spoke about the ArriveCan, but I'm sure they talked about accountability and transparency and proper prudence of the government exercising that prudence over taxpayer money. He won't talk about that, but that's exactly what this motion is about. And if this is a deja vu moment, because it feels like a deja vu moment for me, is approximately 15 months ago, I stood before you, your predecessor in that chair, and was giving a speech on a similar motion. It wasn't worded in the same fashion, Mr. Speaker, but the intent was there that gave the government 100 days to inform the House as to how and what steps they would take to get taxpayers their money back. That was a result of the Auditor General releasing a number of damning reports. And it's important to note at this point is that the Liberal government, this same so-called new government with the same old players who are now saying through the Prime Minister that they totally accept the findings of the Auditor General, they were the ones that opposed the Auditor General looking into the ArriveCan scandal, as we call the ArriveScam scandal, right from the earliest opportunity, Mr. Speaker. So the messaging is very clear in this. The ongoing Liberal ArriveScam saga continues. It is that bad Liberal gift that just keeps on giving. Currently, the Auditor General released a scathing audit on the top ArriveScam contractor, GC Strategies, this 2-person company, basement dwelling company, no brick and mortar, now under RCMP investigation for fraud, received a jaw-dropping $64 million from these Liberals since they took office. Now, this wasn't the first time, as I indicated, that the Auditor General released a report on GC Strategies.
So it goes on pretty lengthy, but I just want to give you a taste of that. And that is exactly why it just feels like a constant cycle. Because the people responsible for the start of the scandal when ArriveCan first started are still in Parliament. Mark Carney is not a new liberal. Mark Carney is not going to change the Liberal Party for damn shit. The people within Mark Carney's cabinet are just reshuffled from the Trudeau cabinet. So, of course, this saga still continues on, but now we're finally getting more information of just how much it costs Canadians for the Liberal government to take that money to an organization that didn't do any work, that didn't even have a proper location for that matter, to develop an application to spy and surveil on Canadians. We were highly duped on this, that they were taking taxpayer dollars to go against Canadians. And it was to the tune of millions of dollars, almost billions of dollars. And there is more details that I'm sure definitely are going to be released if the Auditor General is able to get through this. But there's blockade after blockade from the Liberal Party themselves, because they know that cabinet ministers within the Trudeau cabinet are now part of the Mark Carney administration, and they're going to get caught red-handed. They're going to be caught red-handed and should be criminally prosecuted for the fraud and abuse that comes out of this garbage party, this garbage administration here in Canada. But of course, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. Just like in the United States, politician breaks the law or violates a crime or has no ethics, no morals, no whatsoever. That's just a Tuesday. It's just a Tuesday, according to them. So this is from 2022. This is when ArriveCan first came out, around this time. This is around when COVID. This is from the Daily Hive. Canada's $54 million ArriveCan app recreated for pennies to prove feds wanted cash. $54 million application was made by a third-party developer in less time and almost less than a quarter of how much money it took to make the federal government contracts. So here's this guy, Zane Manji, saying building an app for the entire country of Canada is not an easy task, especially for the government, for Canadian government. There are so many challenges associated with it, especially behind the scenes, but $54 million is a bit too much. Dan from Lazar, that's the third-party company, built an ArriveCan clone. So built the same application in less than 2 days. 2 days. And yet somehow they needed to take $54 million and on top of that, more millions of dollars for years of work. And as Larry Brock pointed out, they don't even have a formal office. They can't even prove that they've done any work because there's no office. There's nothing to prove of this. There's no documentation. So where'd that money go? Where did that money go to make an application to mass surveil and track on Canadians that failed right on arrival? It was dead on arrival. And now where's that money? Where's all the money gone to? Because if another company, a third-party company, can make an exact replica in less than 2 days for pennies, how is this not front page news when taxpayers are forked the bill of $54 million and they don't know where that money went to? They have no idea where that money went to. And that's why the Liberal Party is being held to account, at least in some perspective, by the Conservative rivals, even though Conservative Party won't up the ante when it comes to criticizing the Liberal Party, because the government of Canada, the Parliament of Canada, is corroded with the same agitators, the same people that lobby both sides of the aisles that are campaigning for this. This is all part of the agenda of digital IDs. This is all part of the agenda of mass surveillance, brought to you by the WF, brought to you by BlackRock, brought to you by Brookfield, the same insidious partnership that brought you Mark Carney, and also by Century Initiative, the people that want to increase our population by 100 million people, are also involved in this scandal. So It's good to note that information is being aware of this and how much money is being exploited in these measures. But I fear that nothing's going to be done about this until Canadians wake up, until ordinary people from left to right come together and fight the insidious oligarchy, the fraud and abuse that comes from the entire parliament structure, not just a fraction of it. Even though there are certain individuals involved with it, even though there's certain individuals with a lot more blood on their hands, the whole construct comes from a deeper, higher power. This is all part of the consolidation to bring you digital IDs.